Yes, sir. Mayor Lloyd White.
Here.
Councilmember Lara. City Manager Gibbs.
Here.
ED Manager Kyle.
Here.
Chairman Von Lawson.
Present.
Vice Chair Betty Rader. Member Ahmed. Member Beneke.
Present.
Member Brown. Member Copeland stated he would be absent this evening. Member Moran. Member Vince. Member Glider.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, I will ask, are there any actions of any requests for excused absence other than Mr. Copeland?
No other excused absences.
Hearing none, then at this time, I am going to ask if you would, Your Honor, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sir.
Absolutely. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. I'll address again to Ms. Wheelwright. Are there any adjustments to our agenda?
No, sir.
Hearing none, we'll ask then, are there any conflicts of interest disclosures? Hearing none, we will now move on to the portion of public comment period. Do we have any public comments for this body?
I have no written comments. Rudy, do we have anyone on the line?
We have no one on the line.
Okay. Thank you. With that, then we'll move on to our action items and public hearings and requests. The first order of business is the approval of minutes from May the 11th. And I'm going to ask for just a point of clarification, if I could. At our last meeting, did we or did we not have quorum?
We did not have quorum.
So we would need to also approve the minutes prior to that. We had a set of minutes that we could not take action on.
I believe
So
this was
that was the
the May
one?
11th.
Okay,
Yes.
no problem. Thank you for that correction. If you will review the minutes, and I will entertain a motion to approve or whatever action you want to offer.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
It has been moved and properly second. I'll ask for the roll to be called by Ms. Wheelwright.
Mayor White,
Yes.
City Manager Gibbs,
Yes.
ED Manager Warzinski,
Yes.
Chairman Lawson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rader,
Yes.
Member Beneke.
Yes.
Oh, I see Member Ahmed is here now. I'm going to mark you as present. Did you want to vote on this item, Mr. Ahmed?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And Member Glider,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wheelwright. At this time, I will defer to Mr. Warsinski for updates of projects from city staff and his team.
Thank you, Committee Chair, excuse me, members of the committee. A couple items we want to highlight for significant projects from city staff for tonight is the housing element is going live in terms of our preparation and presentation, and that will be presented to Planning Commission this month on August 23rd. So if that interests you, please either attend or watch via YouTube and so forth. Second thing of note is in the last fiscal year budget, so the current fiscal year 22-23 budget, City Council approved expenditures of a dollar amount to start a downtown Beaumont revitalization plan. And what that does is it furthers the work done on the vision through the general plan that we've discussed here and we've presented to the business community within the downtown area. So the revitalization plan RFP was prepared and was published today. So that closes in roughly a month or so. So we expect to get some good solicitation and bids on performing that consultant service for us. So we're excited about that. I just wanted the committee to know that that was published. If it interests you and you want to look at it, let me know and I'll shoot you over a copy.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any additional business from your team, Mr. Warsinski?
That is all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Hearing none, I'm going to move on to item 3, and I don't want to take anyone's thunder. I do want to personally welcome Mr. Casey Daly to this body, but I'm going to defer again to Mr. Warsinski to provide any formal introduction of this gentleman. Welcome to the Economic Development Committee.
As the committee chair said, we do have Casey Daly from the Western Riverside Council of Governments here to discuss their PACE program. They have 2 PACE programs now. One is for residential. That's been one that's been going for quite some time now and many people are familiar with, but they also have a commercial component to that program. And Councilmember Laura had requested this presentation to the Economic Development Committee, so we scheduled him, and luckily enough, Casey was available to come today and present. So I will go ahead and kick it off to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Casey Daly, Director of Energy and Environmental Programs with the Western Riverside Council of Governments. I'm still Casey Daly. I'm still the Director of Energy and Environmental Programs at WRCOG. I've been with the agency since 2017, and the PACE program is one of the ones that is under my purview, and so really excited and happy to come here to talk to you all about it today. Kyle mentioned this, but WRCOG has been involved with PACE since 2011 when it was initiated. Let me back up a little bit and explain what PACE financing is. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. It came about in 2008 in California through a bill called Assembly Bill 811. And essentially what it allows to happen is for private property owners to finance energy efficient, renewable energy, and water conservation improvements on their home or business, and then that's paid back as a line item on their property tax bill. In 2011, when the program started, it was primarily focused on the residential side. We had partnered with a company called Renovate America to develop and launch the HERO program. In 2014, that program expanded beyond the Western Riverside subregion statewide. And so as you can see, we have now almost every city and county in the state of California that we're able to work with to do these financings. About 2018, 2017, right around the time I got to WRCOG actually, the residential program started to experience some declines, and in 2020, unfortunately, Renovate America declared bankruptcy. So our executive committee, good afternoon, Councilmember Laura, Board Member Laura, nice to see you, directed us to discontinue the residential program and really just focus on the commercial program. The commercial program has continued to grow over these last several years, and wanted to come and share a little bit about it with you all. So WRCOG works with 2 authorized providers, as we refer to them. One is called Nuveen Green Capital, and the other is Twain Financial Partners. So these are private companies. They provide capital to actually deploy on these kinds of projects. And just to kind of give you a sense of some of the projects that we've done over the last few years, a lot of the, what's really neat about commercial PACE contrasted with residential PACE is you can use it for new construction. And when you're talking with developers, when you're working with commercial builders, there's oftentimes a bit of a gap in what they call their capital stack of funding. And so where PACE can come in is to actually fill some of that gap in equity financing. And so what we're able to do, since the improvements can be anything that's water efficient, energy efficient, renewable energy, or seismic strengthening, can be fitted into a PACE project. And so what that means is, on average, 20 to 25% of your construction costs would be eligible for PACE financing. And it's a very attractive option for developers because it frees up equity for themselves, and since it lives on the property tax roll and it stays with the property, long-term financings of projects. So in 2020, 2021, we were able to close 11 projects. Excited to be able to highlight the ones in the Western Riverside subregion. Looking forward to having some from Beaumont. But we did a project in Murrieta that was called West Coast Exotic Cars. It was a retrofit project. So they came in and rehab the whole building. As you can see, we deployed dollars to go towards HVAC, electrical, lighting, plumbing, and roofing improvements. And then another project that we worked on was this one here in Corona. Again, multifamily apartments are also considered commercial, so we can use PACE dollars to go towards multifamily projects as well. So we did this one here in Corona, just under $6 million. Things have continued to go well. We've got a couple more here. I won't go through all of the details. I brought copies of my presentation. If anybody has any questions about it or would like to, take it with you. Here's a fancy little picture of Hendo's Brewing and Spirits down in Temecula. We're excited to go to the grand opening on this one, myself included. This just shows a little bit of the growth that we've seen in our commercial PACE projects over the last few years. We continue to see there be interest in it, especially the fact that you can do it for retrofit of old buildings. Hospitals are good examples where you have an old hospital that wasn't necessarily built prior to Title 24 being enacted in the late 70s. For expansion purposes, you got to go in and you got to seismic harden, if you will, that project so it can withstand earthquakes. So with that, that really concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Let me say, first of all, thank you so much, Mr. Daly, for the presentation. Are there any questions for this gentleman?
I do have a question, Casey. So do the applicants who are interested, would they contact WRCOG to find out how to participate?
They can contact us, and we're happy to point them in the direction of Nuveen and Twain, because those are the ones, when you actually get down to it, they're the ones that are going to be providing the actual capital, and so they're going to want to work with the developer, the property owner, to kind of work through the project with them. And I'm happy to, I do this anytime anybody asks. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, we got this. I say, okay, I can give you a friendly introduction. I'm agnostic, so I'm going to share them with both, and let the private market do what it does.
And I have one question also, if I could, Mr. Daly. Being someone at an institution that deals with a lot of categorical dollars, are these dollars that are permanent, or will they sunset at some point?
So this is these are not sunsetted dollars. This is actually this is what you would refer to as a public-private partnership. WRCOG in this case is the public aspect, and what we are able to do under Assembly Bill 811 is to record levies on the tax roll. And so much like a community facilities district or a Melrose district or a school bond, for example, where you have line items on your property tax bill to go for paying that, the PACE assessment would live in the same spot. Okay. So it's private money, and the private money, along with WRCOG authority and ability to levy the assessments on the tax roll, is how we create this public-private partnership. So long-winded way of saying there really is no end to the money.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Additional questions, Your Honor?
Yeah, how long does it stay on the tax roll?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So the term of the financing, that's one of the really attractive features of it. On new construction, we can go up to 30 years. And then there are other, smaller increments in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. The only real restriction is going to be on the types of products that are installed. So for example, if you had a product that only had let's say a 5-year useful life, we're not going to finance that for a 25-year period, because that obviously puts you in a bad spot if you're paying for something, 10 years down the road and the air conditioner broke. So we do use what we call the weighted useful average life of a product. And so that's kind of how we determine our rules, but how the providers determine the length of the financing term. And the cool thing with the new construction is that we aligned it so that so long as they meet a few kind of requirements, that we can go out to 30 years, which also aligns with a typical mortgage.
Just a quick question too. What's the typical interest rate on that, like the repayment rate on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That really is a function of the providers, because it's they're, in some cases they are linked up, like Nuveen is linked up with Greenworks was bought by Nuveen, so they have interest rates that they don't have to borrow nearly as much as some of the other ones, but it's in the 6%, 7% range.
Okay.
And that varies, that's why I can't be like super specific on it, but that's about the range that it goes to.
Kind of like how the mortgage industry is, it kind of goes alongside of prime, like 3% above prime or 2% above prime?
Yes,
something
sir.
like that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Worsinski, you had a question?
Dr. Brown stole my question. We're on the same
Alright.
page tonight, sir, so I appreciate that.
Very good. Additional questions for Mr. Daly, please? Additional questions? Hearing none, I am definitely interested in having a copy of your presentation, so if we could leave that with Ms. Wheelwright, that would be so great. And again, an outstanding presentation. You are welcome to stay with us. Certainly, always anyone is welcome, but if you're busy, you're also welcome to head home and try to beat the traffic.
I appreciate it. I'll stick around for a little while.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful. We will now move on to item 4, and it is a business incentive package presentation by Mr. Worsinski and Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Committee Chair. I'm going to let Christina Taylor take the lead on this one, and then I'll follow up when she's complete with her portion.
Thank you.
Well, alrighty then. Happy to be here with everybody this evening. So before you tonight, you have a staff report and some attachments which are part of the sort of kickoff, as Kyle referenced earlier, to the downtown business revitalization. I'll call it a program, but really it's a whole vision that council has adopted and charged us with taking steps towards implementing. So tonight, one of the first steps that we'd like to take is present some items for action, which we've previously discussed here, and then present some new items for discussion and recommendation to council as far as utilizing some of that $500,000 that Kyle referenced earlier that council has allocated to economic development, and have some discussion and whatnot. We felt the easiest way to do that would be through a PowerPoint instead of just looking at the papers that you have. So I think Kyle's driving the PowerPoint. I can't really see it, so
If they could bring
you
up
can just follow.
my
Yeah.
screen.
Okay, there we go. Awesome. Okay, so next slide. So a little history on where we're at so far, where we've come from. So we updated the general plan, which took effect in January of 2021. Part of that included the downtown area plan, and that's sort of what spurred the process that we're on right now. Prior to that, in about 2019, City Council had adopted the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and that document actually works and identified action steps to work on stimulating development specific to economic development here in the city. That information was rolled into the general plan as well, so those two documents work together. Now, what Kyle referenced earlier was the Downtown Beaumont Revitalization Plan, and we just issued the RFP today for that. And what that's going to do is build on the downtown area plan and take the components of the general plan and the Economic Development Strategic Plan and come up with something specifically focused on the downtown area. Next slide. So previous things we've discussed here: parking, floor area ratio, and then the new business application streamlining. And each of those things, it's been a few months, I think, since we've discussed them, but we'll go through each one in a little more detail. So the first and what I think is probably one of the most important steps is streamlining the new business application process. And this has been a discussion, I know, with council and even among staff. The application right now is currently about 26 pages. and it's a little bit intimidating for new businesses who want to come in. And the process is the same regardless of whether or not you're occupying a new structure that has been built from the ground up, or if you're going into an existing building. So if you're a retail store going into a building where another retail store is, you're going to go through the same 26 pages as another business who might have built something from the ground up. Regardless of which category of business it falls into, staff really realized that we need to reduce the burden of entry or the barrier to entry with this packet. The packet is fairly dated. There are a lot of steps or a lot of paperwork in there that isn't needed. There are a couple things that we are still required to keep in, such as a stormwater survey and an AQND form. So the Air Quality Management District requires every new business, regardless of type, to fill out a form, and it essentially screens them into needing, to do certain things or screens them out of it. And same thing with the Senate Bill 205 for wastewater, stormwater. We have them fill out the form, and it's just a little yes or no box, and it either screens them in or screens them out. So we're able to reduce our packet from about 26 pages down to about 6 pages if we implement the streamlining process. So it would apply to all new businesses who occupy any building, whether it's new construction or existing construction. And it will require code amendment. The way our code is written right now, the new business application, also referred to as an administrative plot plan application, requires certain aspects of the process that we have established now. So if the direction from the committee is to refer to the council that we do implement this, then staff will prepare the appropriate strikeouts to the zoning code and present that to city council. I'm happy to answer any questions about this now, or if you want to go through the whole presentation and then take questions, or, okay. All right, next slide, please. So now we get into changes to the zoning code, and there were quite a number of things that would have to be addressed through this process. The whole idea is to reduce overly restrictive requirements, and again, this deals with barrier to entry or a business's opportunity to occupy a certain space within the city, whether it be downtown. Of course, right now the focus is on downtown, but theoretically this could apply citywide at council's discretion. The intent really isn't to eliminate guidelines, right? Because we like guidelines, we like standards, but we want to make some adjustments so that it's equitable. So it appears that it's not overburdensome, and everybody kind of has a level playing field with how they're going to be able to occupy and approach doing business in the city. One of those steps we're recommending is eliminating floor area ratio requirements. That was actually a new, something that was newly implemented through the general plan process. But as we've been working with the concept of floor area ratio over the last year and a half, we found that it really is burdensome. And the reason that it's burdensome and actually almost prohibits development from being financially feasible for a developer is because so many of our parcels are small, specifically in the downtown. So if you're dealing with only a 5,000 square foot parcel and you have a 30% floor area ratio, you can essentially only have a 1,500 square foot footprint, right? And so that that really is off-putting to developers. In concept, when we were working on it with the general plan update, the idea was to keep the scale of downtown from not being like Walmart's, right? We didn't want to have downtown be big box. But what we've realized is the size of our parcels downtown are going to do that on their own. So it will essentially work itself out. And as we move through this, there's a couple other aspects in there that we have that work with this. So staff is recommending that we eliminate floor area ratio from the code and go back to the way we were doing it before through just development standards and parking, and the site essentially works itself out. The other thing that we talked about is parking. And parking, again, it's simple in some aspects and it's complicated in others, right? So what we're recommending right now is to temporarily suspend the parking requirements in the downtown area only, meaning the downtown area plan identified Beaumont Avenue and 6th Street, while we're working on the downtown Beaumont revitalization plan. Because part of that plan is going to address how 6th Street works, how Beaumont Avenue works, what that's going to look like. Are we going to do, widen the sidewalks? Are we gonna slow traffic? Are we gonna put street parking back in? Are we gonna do median parking? Is there gonna be shared parking? So all of those things need to be looked at holistically before we make any hard and fast code changes, if that makes sense, right? We don't wanna get ahead and make changes to the code, which are essentially permanent or have to go back and undo it, much like with floor area ratio, without having looked at everything together. So essentially what staff is doing right now is waiving the parking requirements, basically saying, okay, you can occupy the building that's existing, even if your use doesn't meet the parking requirements, if you can show that, we're not gonna have a huge backup of, cars on the street or whatever. And in most cases in the downtown, it's worked out. There's a lot of shared parking opportunities or street parking, and it's been okay. But we do need to address this in an official capacity, because theoretically, we should not be just waiving code requirements. That's not appropriate for staff to be doing. So that would be staff's recommendation on parking at this point in time. So continuing the changes to the zoning code, this next section is specific to the downtown area plan. And allowing the following in the Beaumont mixed use, multifamily apartments and condos. We have some that exist now in that area. And so we've got some non-conforming uses. Allowing that to occur, I think, would help us with our housing element update or our housing element allocation through RENA, but it would also, I think, allow some of those parcels that are not suitable for commercial to be utilized for something without just sitting vacant. This is not something that's a hard, fast recommendation, absolutely open for discussion, but it's something that could be included, I think, that would help with filling in the downtown area. Some other things that we've realized were not allowed in the downtown, or specifically in the Beaumont mixed use, are bars and cocktail lounges. And we do have one or two in there that are existing. And so we think that allowing that use seems to fit with kind of what's already there. Same thing with pet grooming, a use that was overlooked, somehow not included, but again, something that would be suitable for a retail storefront or something like that that provides a service to residents in the city. And then along the lines with bars and cocktail lounges, we have billiards and pool halls, and then tattoo and body piercing, both in the downtown mixed use and Beaumont mixed use. Some of these uses already exist, and they would be considered non-conforming at this point in time, but they tend to work with the mix of uses that are down in these areas already. And then adding the following uses. So I should preface, the ones that we just talked about are permitted in other zones as well. They're just not specifically permitted in some of these downtown zones. The uses next are not included in the zoning code at all, and we would propose adding these. So that would be brewery and alcohol production with on-site tasting, consumption, and also having, of course, a retail or commercial use. So they could brew beer there, you could do a tasting room, you could sell your merchandise to your customers and whatnot. Same thing for distilleries, brewery and distilleries, and then a maker space. And I'll let Kyle expand a little bit more on a maker space, because he's kind of into it.
Before you do that, explain what did you call the brewery?
Breweries and distilleries.
Is that what it?
Yeah, so brewery like the beer, and then distilleries like your whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah, those uses just weren't in our code at all, so.
Are they not in the code for anywhere, or just?
No, not for anywhere.
Not anywhere,
Yeah.
like they don't exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whether we add them in downtown or we add them in some other area, up for discussion this evening on what I think internally we've discussed it as staff, and we think it's a cool use to have almost anywhere that you could put it, but size and scale would then have to be appropriate for the location. So manufacturing zone, obviously you can go much larger scale than if it's downtown, it would need to be a smaller scale appropriate with the location, so.
Great. And then, so makerspace is, and we're not suggesting that we have a large amount of interest in this commercial aspect now, but it is something I've seen in other jurisdictions. You typically see them in larger cities within their downtowns. I even came across one that was partnered with a brewery and a bar. So it was a makerspace and a bar at the same location. So you could drink beer and run your 3D printer and create whatever you want. Fairly unique circumstance that I've not seen elsewhere. But when we're looking at adding new types of uses to our code, I thought of this one. It doesn't mean it's full production of product. It's not manufacturing. It's smaller manufacturing that someone might create a makerspace in which people can create prototypes using 3D printers or other types of concepts like that within a commercial space. Sometimes they rent those machines. Oftentimes I've seen educational establishments running those, and Chair Lawson has discussed a couple of the ones that Mount San Jacinto Community College has. So why shouldn't we have that as an option within our downtown? If someone private or public want to enter this area, or possibly whether they want to enter anywhere in the city, having this type of use identified in our code only helps us.
Thanks, Kyle. Fast food. And that's important because if you looked at the bottom of the slide at footnote 11, we have something in the code that says new fast food restaurants should not be located within 1,000 feet of another fast food restaurant. So staff would like to discuss, obviously, that do we like that radius still? Do we like that distance? But also, what do we think? What do we classify as fast food? Is it anything with a drive-through? Is it just, sort of a standardized menu intended for quick service? Do we want to clarify this, in some way? In addition to that, we have some footnotes that need clarification. So footnote number 3, and that is, just so everybody understands. So we have a use table that's part of the zoning code, and that's what all of this information is coming from. And it's available on the website for anybody in the public to view. But there are footnotes associated with, sort of caveats associated with certain uses that are identified there. Footnote number 3 refers to limiting a use to 2,500 square feet. And so there are certain types of uses that are called out in the code for this. And one of the reasons staff feels this needs adjusting is because it works almost like floor area ratio in the sense that we are capping with a hard number the size of a certain type of use. And a good example, we have a business in downtown that's got an existing market that's very popular, and they've often talked about expanding. Since these regulations have come into place, there's a cap on how much they can expand, and it doesn't work with what their plan is. And so, and that's one example. We have others that have come up, but we've realized that putting a hard, fast number instead of having some discretionary discretionary ability or flexibility built in has deterred people from investing further in their existing use or building something new. So instead of having it limited to a certain square footage, I think the idea of having discretion or flexibility as to size and scale being appropriate with the surrounding area would be a better use, or maybe setting a maximum at a much higher rate and then having staff make a recommendation to Planning Commission and or council on what that would be. Because most of the uses where this would impact are going to be for new construction. Our existing uses don't fall into this our existing structures don't fall into this category. So anything that would fall under this footnote would then have to, at a minimum, go to Planning Commission for approval. So the same thing could be said for footnote number 7. So whether it's a pharmacy or a grocery store, a market, 5,000 square feet sounds kind of big, but It's really not when you think about, your average liquor store, market, restaurant, something like that. It does kind of cap or limit, what folks are able to do on a certain parcel. And again, because of the size of the parcels in downtown, a lot of it becomes self-regulating. By the time they do setbacks, parking, landscaping, that kind of thing, they've essentially left themselves with what's buildable. And then footnote number 10, live work unit only permitted in the primary structure. I don't know that it's necessary for that to only be in the primary structure. I think a live work could be permitted in any of the, commercial mixed use type locations, and we're happy to discuss that as well. So with that, it concludes the sort of planning end of the recommendations. We're happy to discuss before Kyle jumps on and talks about the $500,000 we have to spend on downtown incentives, which will be much more fun than this. So,
Hello? This is Chris online. Are the recommendations in alignment with the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control as far as their stipulations for licensing?
so any alcohol, any ABC license at all is required to be approved by Planning Commission, whether it's on-site consumption such as a restaurant or bar, or off-site consumption like a liquor store, grocery store, anything like, or a small market, I should say. Most grocery stores are exempt. But anything like that would have to be approved by Planning Commission, and staff works with ABC to do a finding of public convenience and necessity as required. And so if an area is oversaturated, the PCN, the public convenience and necessity findings, have to be made and approved by Planning Commission in order for that to be licensed. So I would say, yes, these are in alignment and would be vetted through both ABC and staff and Planning Commission process.
Thank you.
So, on the floor area ratio, the increase to that, would that also require parking, or would we be waiving the parking on something like that?
For floor area ratio?
When you increase, or when you allow or when we adjust the floor area ratio, excuse me.
So for the parking, what staff would recommend is waiving for existing structures. And I should have been more clear on that, not for new construction. So new construction would have to come in and meet current parking standards. This would be for existing buildings, our existing structures on those small parcels,
Right.
Especially from like California over to Palm or Penn, in that area. And then Beaumont Avenue, same thing.
Okay. And I really like the implementation, or at least the attempt to implement the reduction in the application warrant piece that we have now. So when you temporarily suspend parking, and then we go ahead and we turn around and go back and implement parking requirements, have you noticed it in your experience, has that been a difficult transition? Or do businesses understand that that's coming, and by the time you transition back to requiring or some form of parking standard, additional parking has already been created by that time? Is that what we anticipate?
So we'll have to do some outreach with,
Sorry.
we'll have to do some outreach with the applicants as they come in and let them know. There will have to be a permanent solution at some point, right? Because the existing parcels, whether we, with existing structures, whether we waive it temporarily now or not, when that waiver is lifted, we're still going to have parking, or we're going to still have parcels without parking.
Right.
So what that temporary waiver will do will not just allow us to get through this downtown revitalization plan process, but it will then allow staff time to work with the business owners and with council, city manager, to come up with some, likely something in the code that would address that issue. So it would be temporary. We will have to come up with a permanent solution. Otherwise, when we lift the waiver, we'll be in the same position that we are now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then my last question is, when you look at the live work, you're talking about commercial operations live work, right? You're not talking about a residential property where you have that's zone residential
Right, yeah, we have live work, there's criteria in the code for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Ms. Taylor?
The footnotes, is that all just the downtown area?
It is a downtown area, yes. So that is all specific to Chapter 17.19, which specifically addresses the downtown area plan. It is not the use table for the citywide code. It is just the downtown area plan specifically.
Okay, and how would you see the immediate outcome of waiving the parking? I mean, in other words, what are businesses going to do right away that they're not doing now?
I'm not sure that the businesses will do anything different. We've had sometimes come up where businesses have been like, oh, doesn't meet the parking requirements for the use, so we don't know if we should enter into the lease agreement or, something like that. Because, as I said earlier, we're sort of making this determination at a staff level as opposed to on an official level. So I think what it does is it clarifies and gives staff direction and ability to work with the applicants. And I think it will give some of the applicants, a lot of them don't really, I don't want to say they don't care. They generally defer to staff. If we say, no, you're good to go, we're going to sign off on your business license, then they're okay with it. But it will make things more solidified and conforming in the sense that we have the authority to do so.
So you're talking right now
Yeah.
about existing structures for new tenants?
Yes, sir.
What about existing structures with existing tenants? Are we changing their parking?
No, but essentially then it would apply to them as well. So say our Cornerstone Barbecue. I remember this with him specifically. So that parking is sort of a shared area for several units. And if you calced it out per unit, there's not enough space because restaurants have like a 1 to 100 square foot ratio versus retail or other that's, 1 to 200 or 1 to 250. And so essentially what the waiver would do would then be if, say they wanted to sell the building and escrow or a zoning request came in to say, hey, are they compliant with parking? Technically, we could say, yes, right now there's a waiver on parking for existing structures. So there's no minimum parking requirement allowed or required. So they would be compliant essentially.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Additional questions for Ms. Taylor?
I have a question. Excellent presentation, by the way. I'm never really in favor of waiving anything. I think that's too nebulous in the sense that it's like, okay, it's a wild, wild west. You waive it, there's no requirement out there. I guess I don't like the word waive. I don't know if you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with a different word, but policies and procedures are put in place for reasons, usually historical in context or just by lawsuits oftentimes dictate some of these things. But anyway, I'm just curious, in your initial presentation, your first statement, you basically said by the limitations of lot sizes in downtown area. And I'm just wondering if we're structuring a lot of these recommendations on codes based on the fact that in our minds, we're thinking we're going to always have these small lots downtown that we're going to have to deal with. To me, if you're really serious about redevelopment, you need to think a little bigger. You need to think about a developer comes in and purchases a whole block and wants to put something significant in that block. And I think we ought to try to, and I don't know if we could do that through rules and regulations, but I think we need to try to encourage that kind of attitude, if you want to call it that, that we're really interested in developing downtown. We don't want small lots forever. That was 1940, 1950, that served a purpose. We really want a downtown we need to kind of try to encourage people to come in and try to put lots together. A good thing with the city owning a lot of property downtown, you know, a lot of the redevelopment can happen on city property because you control that. And I know I've seen some great plans to do just that. So in conjunction with that, we need to try to encourage maybe getting other people interested in maybe consolidating some lots, you know, expanding that. And then, you know, our rules and regulations can follow that concept. It's just an idea.
Christina, I can touch on some of those items that committee member Beneke brought up. Very salient points. We've had discussions with people, not too often because it's very expensive to acquire entire blocks. The major hurdle with that type of concept is the floor area ratio. If we're looking at going 2 or 3 stories, purchasing a block, building vertical, the 35%, I think Christina used the example of a 5,000 square foot lot. You could only build 35%, which nets you 1,500 square feet. Well, if that's 2 stories, that's only 750 square feet times 2. And then if you go 3, that's even smaller at 500. So that would be a very funny looking development if it was 500 square feet up on 5,000 square foot lot. But what I believe would happen if we temporarily restricted parking requirements or possibly eliminate those in the future, and you had a developer that was interested in buying an entire block and redeveloping it in accordance with the downtown area plan and the revitalization plan, is developers want to have adequate parking for their tenants. They want to have adequate parking for customers of their tenants. So if they have a residential aspect, you can expect that no one's going to want to rent an apartment complex without a parking spot. You can expect that if you have businesses in there, they need a certain amount of parking on site or nearby to have that business succeed. So I would be very shocked if someone was going to come in and propose a project with floor area ratio at 100, 200, 300% with no parking on site, because they have to have a project that actually survives and functions correctly. So I definitely know that that will definitely be in our minds as we move forward and we talk to people about developing within the downtown. I think these concepts that are laid out here are more in lines of, we have existing businesses that might want to relocate. They want to relocate to a lot that has 4 parking spots where the code says they need 25, and that's just prohibitive. They may not even get to planning to get an application like Christina talked about, because they're talking to me and I said, well, there's these parking requirements and that's what it is. So they don't even file an application, because why file an application when you know the answer is going to be no at the end of the day?
Yeah, and the intent is not to waive parking across the board forever for everybody, right? It's to hopefully alleviate a current issue temporarily while we come up with a better permanent solution through the processes that we're going through right now. And as another point for the member, we actually do have a downtown lot consolidation plan that has been in effect been available for the past 8 years through the previous housing element. And the lot consolidation program does allow for incentives and whatnot if anybody would choose to come in and buy multiple properties within the downtown. And in my time here, nobody has taken advantage of it. Kyle's been here longer than me, and he's shaking his head no too. So I don't know that we've had anybody take advantage of it. It may have been a little premature in the scheme of utilizing it, where now we're starting to see a lot more activity in the downtown. And I think that it may be something that we see more action on or more interest in maybe the next 8 years.
Member Rader, you had a question, and then Member Brown.
Just one thing, I don't see a lot of the businesses that decide not to come to Beaumont, but I have had a few businesses say that they could not get past the parking requirements. So we have lost business because of that. Now, I don't see all of them, but I have seen some. And assumptions are scary, but I would assume that this deferred parking requirement has a lot to do with the fact that with the revitalization, the city is planning on building some additional parking or parking structures that would create an environment where we could then meet the additional parking that people are.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a future parking addition somewhere.
Right, yeah, the building a structure would be a very much more long-term sort of capital project, but ideally, we would look at revising the parking standards and the parking opportunities for a much easier approach to shared parking, on-street parking, maybe allowing on-street parking to count towards parking availability and some things like that. We do have the parking management master plan, which I know you guys have heard us talk about periodically, which also provides a lot of resources and a lot of data that we need to go ahead and make those, to make that analysis. And it's one of the documents that we included in the RFP for downtown for consultants who are interested to look at that and see, look, we have this data already ready for you to utilize to help us figure out how we can come up with doing something a better way than what we're doing now.
And I just have a question. Your very last screen that you had up there, could you bring that back? Is that possible?
It's a footnote screen, I think, right?
Yeah, the footnote screen.
Yeah, it's on there.
Okay.
Kyle's driving, Miss Betty, so I don't.
It's on there, I just need
Okay.
them to switch. I don't control the cameras.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Okay, I just have a question, and maybe it's because I didn't study enough paperwork that I got, or something. The footnote refers back to, like the second footnote there refers back to, it says these uses, but I don't know what those uses are.
So let me,
These uses shall not be located, but I don't know what those
So
uses are.
it is referring to like liquor stores, essentially. So what would sell, what your package store or whatever sells alcohol, like our ones that we have on Beaumont Avenue and on 6th Street, it would be those. I believe that's the only place that is called out.
Well, see footnote 7, use is limited to 5,000 square feet, but I don't know really what kind of use.
Got it. So there's actually several. So we have anything from educational facilities like tutoring and testing sites, bakeries, grocery stores. It's a wide variety of uses for footnote 7, which is why we have the concern. Because again, we've had some interest in businesses expanding, and it's been a little bit, it's been complicated because we don't have the ability to work with them. What if they're 5,200 square feet? What if that's their number and we're capped at 5,000, right? Or what if it's 6,000, but in the scheme of scale, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, So those are the things we're concerned about with with those uses. But I know I should have given you guys all a lovely matrix of pages and pages of the uses, but yeah, flipping through bakeries, tutoring and testing, there's grocery, there is, office space. So essentially it's really capping building size for a lot of uses that would come in.
Yeah, when we got looking through it in fine detail, it was very clear on the intent of the code was so that a Walmart doesn't get built in the downtown, or that a huge office building doesn't get built in the downtown. But what was not clear is where the 2,500 or the 5,000 number came from. It's like, if it was 2,499, it's okay, but not 2,501.
I think the analysis happened with looking at the size of a lot of the existing buildings in downtown, which again, we know are very old, and that's relative to the size of the lots, which were also subdivided decades and decades ago, right? So the concept was to maintain scale, but as we, like Kyle said, as we get to working with people that own businesses or want to expand, want to build, it's proven to be prohibitive. And so the idea would be then to staff analyze. Any new construction has to go to planning commission, so we would be able to make a recommendation to the commission as to whether or not it fit with the size and scale of the surrounding area, and we weren't gonna have something that sticks out like a sore thumb, even if it is maybe bigger than 5,000 square feet.
Member Brown.
I just, I had a question on the footnote 4. Is there a reason why, is there a particular reason why we would want to change that shall to should in terms of establishments or mixed use establishments like liquor stores not being built within 1,000 feet of schools? I'm just curious.
No particular reason other than shall gives us some flexibility and should does not. But again, up for discussion. So I fully anticipated that question from you, Dr. Brown.
Yeah,
I said if anybody's going to ask about why we would want to let liquor stores be next to schools, it's going to be Dr. Brown.
Dr. Brown wasn't the only one. I had the same question, and I guess I was even thinking more in terms of nefarious businesses that might open up that kids should not be exposed to. And I won't start naming them. We can all use our own imagination. I support anybody's right to live any lifestyle they wish. However, I don't know that our babies should be exposed. Now, that said, if we say if we say should, that might give them the idea that they can. But if we say shall not, versus should not.
Right.
I think that's probably a different interpretation. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's the intent is right now it says shall not, meaning they cannot be located.
Right.
Should not means
Possibly.
we
they
don't want
could.
you to go there,
But-
but we're going to take a look at it.
And I'd be concerned about that. That's the papa bearing me and the grandfather. in me, so.
It's definitely something we kicked around. The main reason that I think it's presented is because we've received a couple interests from like a brewery within 1,000 feet of Wellwood. And Wellwood, as you know, is within kind of the downtown area. It's not on the main drag, right? But a lot of those frontage buildings along 6th on both sides, north and south side of 6th Street, are within 1,000 feet as a bird flies of Wellwood School. And I think the way the way the code is written right now, shall means they cannot put one in there. Should allows it to go through the planning process where planning commission ultimately could decide if it's at 988 feet on 6th Street through a conditional use permit that could be revoked if they're up to nefarious acts and so forth. This just provides an option where the current code, it's just no, can't even talk about it. It's not an option.
And don't get me wrong, if you tell us not to change it, it's one less thing on our list. So our feelings don't be hurt, but.
Well, I think, is that what you're looking for as a recommendation for that?
Yeah, essentially,
Okay.
what we're looking for tonight, both on this stuff and then the stuff that Kyle will get into shortly, is a recommendation from Economic Development Committee to council. And we give you some options on, what those recommendations may look like at the end of the slide. So you have some options on discussion.
I think my concern wasn't necessarily like a family establishment that may serve liquor. It was more of, we're starting to see more and more of retail stores that are selling multiple things that do target younger kids.
Understood,
And so
yes.
tobacco being one of them, vaping, we have a big vape issue in our schools. And so encouraging that, or not encouraging, it's not encouraging, but having it nearby is probably not the best idea, at least in my mind. So.
Understood. Yep.
Provides that hangout at lunchtime that we probably shouldn't be going across the street to see.
Right. And that was another, just as a point, we have a school that's built kind of right across the street from Stater Brothers, which has some other establishments, and we have had issues there at some of those establishments trying to make sure that we're maintaining a sense of order, releasing 1,000 kids at one time for a school release can be hectic. It can be a little bit dangerous crossing the roads, and then you get them all into one area. So anytime that we can somewhat limit that by distance, I'm all for it.
Okay, understood.
I've been there when that's happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I agree with the questions and concerns about shall and should. But on this, what we're doing here, just so I understand, is we're making recommendations, and the recommendations will include even the ones that we're concerned about to council, right?
Yes, correct. So staff will, and it'll be a collective effort between Kyle, Carol, Economic Development Planning, and we'll prepare a staff report to council, depending on the direction that comes out of the meeting this evening. And it will summarize what was presented, the feedback on each of the recommendations, meaning concern on this one, but maybe support for eliminating floor area ratio, concerns with waiving the parking or not, that kind of thing. And then council, as the full body, would then make the final determination on, what changes would be made, or if they wanted all the changes or part of them, or revise some of them. So, yeah.
I did have one other question on the floor area ratio. Is that just for the downtown area, or is that like for the entire city?
So it's primarily focused on the downtown. We have a couple zones that were actually, I think, new zones that we brought in that have some floor area ratio, and we would likely recommend just removing it from those as well.
Okay.
But the goal tonight is to focus specifically on the downtown.
Gotcha. And then you said it was just temporary until a better process or whatever. Is the ultimate goal maybe like 80%? Is that what it is, or is it not?
A floor area
The floor
ratio?
area ratio.
So the goal would be to just not have floor area ratio. We did not have floor area ratio prior to 2021. And so it was a new concept. And because the downtown area plan was somewhat of a new concept as well, the idea was, again, to keep everything in scale and keep from having massive buildings put in,
Right.
unnecessarily. But downtown has done pretty well for itself so far, up to 2021 with everything building kind of in concert. And so I don't know that I think the floor area ratio honestly is doing more harm than good.
Right.
But you could create a formula based on whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories.
We could. It complicates things a little, but if you would like us to look at that, we can.
Brainstorming, throwing out ideas.
Carol's she's better at the math than I am, so.
Not to belabor the point, and I get it, like, people will build, it seems like should be reasonable establishments and whatnot, but if it's waived, technically someone, I guess, could build like a 7-story building right next to it.
No. So there's still development standards.
Okay.
So this only waives that floor area ratio component. So there are still standards in the downtown that say you can't build something over 3 stories or 35 feet. There's still setback requirements, meaning you can't, either you have to be up on the front property line and your building has to look a certain way, or you have to be set back 10 feet and that has to be landscaped.
Right.
You still have to do your sidewalk, curb and gutter. You still have to meet all of the other design guidelines, or not design guidelines, development standards. This was an extra standard that was thrown in that would then say, and on top of doing all the things we already require, you can only build on this much of your property.
Okay.
Christina, the parking requirements do apply to new construction. So the floor area ratio, like for the Best Buy Center, it's way less than 35% and we didn't have floor area ratio when all of those were built.
Right.
It's just the parking requirements require the buildings to be a certain size and the rest to be parking, which predominantly in my experience is around 25% lot coverage for retail shopping centers, which is below the 35%, but it kind of works itself out. Same would be for multi-stories. We still have the parking requirements for new construction, which inherently is going to lower the ratio.
Buildable area, yeah.
Right.
This was just an added layer that you had to figure out how to navigate as well.
Sorry for all the questions.
No, that's-
Vaughn and I
that's what
run
we're here
schools.
for. This is- It's
This is
great
all new for us.
discussion.
Good questions.
So our recommendation that we're gonna move forward is this as well as what he's gonna talk about, but they're not related, correct?
So it's related in the sense that it pertains to the downtown. This was just sort of closing the loop on things that we have previously discussed here. What Kyle's presenting is going to be new information related to funding that was allocated this fiscal year by council.
But we can give you direction on what we've seen so far.
Yes, you can if you'd like
And
to.
sort of put that behind us.
Yep.
That's my thought.
Certainly. If we want as a group, we can begin to open up for recommendations that could be provided on this section that Ms. Taylor has provided, and then move on to Mr. Warsinski's presentation. Any thoughts on how you want to coin this language?
Is your
Or
mic on?
Oh, say again?
Is your mic on?
Yeah, actually, it is. Normally, you can hear me without the mic, and that's something I apologize. I must be getting quiet in my California days here. How would you all like to
Would you
coin
like me
that
to just
language?
move through each item and then you guys can give me
Well,
a?
I don't know that we've seen anything that we completely disagree with,
No.
right?
Okay.
I think the only concern that we had certainly is number 4. And again, you know, even then, Mayor White, and I'm one of those that believes that even that starts with the parenting in the home, you know, telling your kid where they will and won't go. But certainly I don't want to encourage or test them, I guess, if you will. And then, you know, Dr. Brown, how difficult that can be sometimes telling young people not to do, and they say, oh, we'll see anyway.
Right.
So that would be my only concern, number 4. Everything else, I think, is definitely perfect. It's doable.
I'm in agreement as well. I think shall should remain on that footnote 4 if it applies to what we were discussing.
Yeah.
And then the rest, I would be totally fine with. Yeah.
You need a motion?
Awesome.
Just a quick comment. Would something like this go to planning commission after staff has done the review? Or does that just go, if they were to approve it, let's just say it's the brewery that's within 1,000 feet of the school?
Yeah.
Does it gets reviewed by staff makes a recommendation, and then does it go to planning commission?
Yes, anything involving alcohol automatically goes to planning commission. ABC requires, our code requires that planning commission give the approval, and then we have to provide the approval as well as the public convenience and necessity findings, which are required if an area is oversaturated already, to ABC. So it's not a staff level determination.
Right. But staff could say, you know what, we don't support this because of X, Y, Z. And then it would go to planning
Yeah.
commission, and they could say, yeah, we agree with staff, or
Yeah.
we don't. Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So maybe in our recommendation, we should sort of take a vote on the shall versus should. I mean, it'll still go to council
Yes.
as council can do what they want. But I think if we are in strong support of shall, and I would vote for changing it to should based on what Kyle said regarding the Wellwood example. So
Totally understand.
maybe we take a little
I'll
direction on that one. See,
I'll entertain a motion on that item 4 alone. I think we can all have general consensus on the other items, but I'll entertain a motion on item 4 just for the record that we know what the vote was. Ms. Wheelwright, I'm sorry, let me first entertain a motion. And a
so I'll
second.
move to approve the staff recommendation on number 4.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second. Ms. Wheelwright, will you call the roll, please?
And just for clarification, this for footnote 4?
Yes.
Footnote 4,
Okay,
and
thank you.
the mayor has indicated that his support would be for it to change to should rather than shall.
And just to clarify, so that is for any establishment that sells alcohol, or is it?
It's specific to liquor stores themselves.
Liquor stores
The
themselves.
Liquor stores themselves, but anything, whether it's a liquor store or anything else that sells alcohol, serves alcohol in any form or fashion, makes alcohol if it ends up being a distillery or brewery, automatically has to go to planning commission, regardless of whether it's new construction or an existing building or anything. So anything involving an alcohol license whatsoever automatically goes to planning commission.
But footnote 4 is specific to liquor stores.
Footnote 4 is specific to liquor stores.
No
Okay,
other, no other businesses?
I didn't fully understand that, so I will withdraw my motion.
Well, let me ask for clarification, point of clarification. You're
Oh,
saying it doesn't
sorry.
apply to any other type of business?
Bars and cocktail lounges as well.
It does apply to those as well. So any other type of nightlife type activity would not apply to that? Okay.
Yeah, if it's specifically, well, again, council can discuss this further, but if it's specifically only for liquor stores, then I'm I'm,
Liquor stores, bars, and cocktail lounges.
yeah, I'll withdraw my motion.
Does it have it for restaurants with alcohol?
That's what I was gonna ask, or if they serve food, is that considered a
'Cause
restaurant? I don't know.
That's what I was thinking. If it's a mom and pop restaurant that has a beer and wine license,
Right,
that's different than a liquor store.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if Mayor White would consider amending his motion maybe to exclude liquor stores from that, because I have a concern as well with liquor stores, but if you have a brewery or a what do you call it, bar,
Right.
I think the kids are not gonna be an issue because.
Not allowed, not allowed.
But liquor stores sell liquor, candy,
Sure,
vape
right,
and things like
absolutely.
that, so
Yep.
if we could exclude liquor stores, I think I'd
Yeah.
be more comfortable with.
We can arrange it however committee wants to recommend it, and then council can ultimately decide on that. But yeah, we can specifically leave it pertinent to liquor stores or liquor stores and smoke shops, even if we wanted to expand it, right? Because I've heard that concern as well tonight. So, and then make sure that it doesn't apply to, restaurants that serve alcohols or bars and lounges that are automatically going to prohibit anyone under 21 from entering anyway.
But you
So-
say the code is, if we leave it as it is, it already does that, right? It already says liquor stores, no.
Liquor stores,
Everything else, maybe.
bars and cocktail lounges are included in that as well. So that would essentially, I think, apply to, by interpolation, probably your breweries down the road and things like that that were alcohol as the primary use.
Okay, then.
That was my question,
yeah.
is there a difference between a bar and a brewery?
Well, I would think a bar serves alcohol, a brewery makes it and serves it. So that's why I say by default, I think a brewery would essentially fall into that category because we're looking at alcohol as the primary use. And so I think someone could make a case that,
Well, and I like
The same
what
should apply.
Mr. Lara brought up regarding the fact that bars and cocktail lounges and breweries are not gonna let high school kids in there
Right.
anyways.
yeah.
I think the only concern with like just a bar that is not a restaurant or, a family establishment might attract folks that, that we don't necessarily, I mean, not that, I'm not saying that either. I don't know how to say it, but like.
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
People wandering out of that onto a school, onto the grounds of a school is a concern, and that,
Yeah. And I think for, the high school, just going through the zoning map in my head, not too much of a risk from the city standpoint that it would locate there. When you get around towards Mountain View Middle School and then the elementary schools in the downtown area. Palm, and then the charter school Kyle referred to and some of the others. There is the potential because they are within that 1,000 feet of a commercial or mixed-use zone that it could occur. But like Sanji is substantially surrounded by residential with no real opportunity for commercial. Mountain View is probably the closest one to maybe being impacted by that with the commercial center that could be adjacent there off of Oak Valley. But it's more your elementary schools that are in the core that would be affected.
But then again, bars and cocktail lounges and breweries have to go through the planning committee as well, right?
Yes,
So that would be a consideration when.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we could exclude liquor stores and then those other establishments would go through a planning committee that would have consideration about locations of schools.
Absolutely.
So the proper motion is that we continue to use shall for liquor stores and should for non-liquor stores. Is that what we're saying?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and properly second, that we shall use the word shall to apply to liquor stores and use the word should for those that do not fall into the category of serving or selling alcohol.
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Wheelwright, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
City Manager Gibbs,
Yes.
ED Manager Warzinski,
Yes.
Chairman Lawson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rader,
Yes.
Member Ahmed,
Yes.
Member Beneke,
Yes.
Member Brown,
Yes.
and Member Glider.
Yes.
Thank you all. I am clear on my direction. I appreciate the robust discussion. It's been very fun. And now it is Kyle's turn to walk you through some much more interesting and exciting items.
Before we go on to that, Nicole, could we take a formal action just on recommending the rest of them as one other package with a roll call vote?
Sure. Or a
Just make it-
consensus is fine too.
Yeah, that works just fine with me.
Yeah, a consensus.
Yeah, we have a consensus
Yeah,
on
we have
everything else,
consensus on
right?
those other ones, so
Perfect.
I didn't think we needed to take a necessary vote. It's just a matter of record.
Excellent. All right, so now we're going to move on. So there was a question that came up on how what Christina presented dovetails in with the incentive package. And really, she laid out that the general plan has certain aspects that relate to the downtown, and that the economic development strategic plan has aspects that's related to the downtown, incentivizing downtown development. And when the city started or embarked on presenting that downtown area plan to the different business groups, the chamber breakfast and so forth, we started getting responses back. And it was twofold. One was our current process, which is kind of what Christina went over in detail on different barriers of entry to the downtown area, things that were restricting movement within that area, and that's what we just handled. The second thing we heard from businesses and landowners and potential developers and developers went to the downtown is they would like to have incentives to move in. How can we attract businesses to the area, or how can we reduce other barriers of entry that weren't zoning code or planning or business license aspects that Christina handled? So in the budget process, the staff came up with a couple items and a dollar amount that went to city council, and the city council thankfully approved that dollar amount in terms of a downtown business incentive package. So that amount was $500,000, and now it comes to how do we create, develop, and draft an incentive package to spend that money. So that's what we're going to be presenting, at least some ideas and concepts to the committee tonight. So first and foremost would be a facade improvement program. I think these all go. The second's business attraction incentive program. We have pre-application fee waiver, sewer connection fee deferral. Yeah, I'll skip those. Although energy efficiency can be provided through a program through our friends over at WRCOG, it's just not going to be part of our expenditures from our council. So, Christina, you correctly put that one on there. It was a perfect segue to Casey's program. So, to get into the downtown facade improvement program, we had one of these back a while ago. There was one business that took advantage of it, and that was the corner of Beaumont Avenue and 6th Street. That's why that building looks kind of nicer than some of the surrounding buildings, is because they took advantage of that program back when we had it in 2008 or 2009 or so. What the program really does is it allows the city to partner with the developer, the property owner that wants to improve what the outside or the facade of their building looks like. And the program can go multiple different ways. It can be structured different ways. Really, it would help them construct the improvements, ideally, or in my opinion, with a matching component. So if they wanted to spend $100,000 and they didn't have $100,000, but they had 50, if we had a matching component at 50-50 and we allocated up to $50,000 per development, then that project would work. That's just an example. So one is, I think, to go through these one by one, is would this be a program that the EDC would think should be included in the downtown incentive program to be allowable for these dollars? If so, what would be a good maximum dollar amount per applicant or per development that we would recommend be included in the proposed program? Should it be a matching percentage, as I explained in my example, or should it just be a grant where they could utilize it? Design standards, do we want to create design standards that they have to match? Or do we give it to them and do they use it to paint their building bright purple? Those types of things, right? And then last, review process would be through development review, which is the committee comprised of every department of the city, including the city manager's office. So the concept would be, if this program was created, we have applications that come in. And applications are going to show what they want to do, how much money they're requesting. So the review process for those applications would be an entire committee, which is comprised of all the city departments that get to weigh in on the viability and the merit of each of those applications.
And if I can add a little bit by way of just how the facade program would have to work. So if this is something that sounds like the committee would be interested in referring up to council for their further discussion, what would happen is if the council decided to adopt this program, staff would then have to work with the consultant who would do our downtown revitalization plan to come up with, I'll just use, for example, say 3 different types of facades or exterior options. So there would be some flexibility to highlight the uniqueness of the various buildings, because obviously we understand downtown is historic and there's a lot of, cool structures. We don't want everything to look the same, but we do want to standardize in some regard thematically, color palettes and signage and, things like that might help improve just the overall aesthetic appearance. And so we would then have to work with someone to come up with these, thematic options for then a business to select which one they would like to, put on their building. And then there would be a cost associated, and depending on how the cost was structured, then, they could proceed accordingly. So your maximums may vary depending on what type of facade improvement they choose to go with based on the options. But there's still some work that would have to be done if this program would be recommended forward.
Any comments or thoughts from committee members, please, on this particular proposal? Member Rader?
At the downtown revitalization meeting that we had a very brief conversation, and you mentioned that we don't have design review guidelines at all in the city. And I was very shocked to find that out. And while we don't want to make it very restrictive and make everyone look alike, we definitely don't want to go down that path. But we definitely need something, because if not, we're going to end up with hodgepodge forever. It's never going to look nice.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that would warrant maybe another outreach meeting with the business community to get some input, because again, I remember our conversation, and we don't want everything to look the same. We have so much character in the downtown and so many cool buildings, and it's so diverse. Each section of downtown that you move through, you can see the progression, right? So we don't want to lose that. But I think speaking more to color palettes, or, removing some of the old can box signs and maybe going to something a little more like, channel letters and, something that just improves the look, little things that can help. But you're right, we don't have design guidelines, so this would be a little step in that direction, in providing some guidelines that would keep things from being pink or purple maybe in the downtown.
It's always beneficial too to, kind of glom onto another city that has a look maybe that we're trying to achieve, and find out what their design review guidelines are, and, just mimic that rather than trying to start it from the very beginning.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Additional comments?
So how would you start discussing design standards from when you don't have a starting place? In other words, would we do it through a committee like this? Would we do it through community outreach. I like the idea of business outreach.
Like, am I far enough away that she can't kick me when I start talking? I'm like, just continue. So there are a couple of ways we could go about this. So yes, business input is very important, especially if we're talking specifically about the downtown. Miss Betty's comment about looking at downtowns that we like how they look. Claremont's got a fabulous downtown. Redlands has a wonderful downtown, right? And so even Temecula, but Temecula's Old Town is very themed in a different way, right? So we can look at different things or take input from things that people like about certain downtowns and maybe things they don't, and then start looking through and developing standards or guidelines based on that. Ideally, I would recommend that at some point through economic development and in conjunction with the downtown revitalization plan, that we have a consultant on board who can actually come up with something formalized. It's not terribly expensive in the scheme of what we've already allocated for the plan. The other option is to do something citywide, to develop design guidelines for each of the commercial, residential, industrial throughout town, because they don't exist for anything, and then have a special subsection for downtown specifically. So, and ideally that would be staff's preference, but at our discussion at the last council meeting with the land use plan and the discussion on design there, it's something that would be a great tool, I think, for staff to have and for commission and council to utilize also to help make decisions. But I think it would give guidelines to the businesses as well to sort of know what they're expecting, so they're not just like, well, what do you want to see? What can we do? What can't we do? Or leave us to negotiate back and forth without any real teeth behind us to do so.
Christina, the RFP that we published today has those public meetings built into it to create the revitalization plan. It also has a separate line item that asks them for a separate bid package for design guidelines for the downtown. So it's contemplated in that document that there will be public outreach to businesses. There will be meetings here at EDC, at Planning Commission, and at City Council, and that if the price comes in good with the revitalization plan, we might be hiring the same company, or they may have a sub that slips into their contract that it specializes in design guidelines, architecture firm or something of that sort, contractor that can assist us in developing those in conjunction with the revitalization plan.
Additional comments?
Yeah, having been through this song and dance in 2008, 2009, as referenced by Kyle. Basically, facade programs only work if you get the buy-in of the people that are going to benefit. And then you definitely have to have some kind of theme, or else you're never going to create the kind of atmosphere or look that you're putting your money into. And I think one of the reasons it failed back in 08 and 09 was, we came up with color schemes, and we looked at different cities, and we looked at hardscape, we looked at roadways, sidewalk, we looked at everything. And there just wasn't enough money to do it all. So, I think, commerce, the economy, how sustainable our economy is overall, the growth of this area, which we know is growing rapidly. There are a lot of positives going on that will provide direction in the future for how our downtown develops. We just need to get some buy-in from the downtown community, and we need to forge that plan that has the theme or concept we want. You want an old town, you want a new town, you want a mixed town, you want a restaurant town where everything's a restaurant. there's all kinds of ways to go. But you do need that theme or else any program's not going to really work in the downtown area.
Additional comments? Additional comments?
Go ahead.
Councilman?
So, is it possible to get that slide back up? Because are we discussing just the design guidelines at this time? Because there were several items that Kyle touched on. I
Yeah,
just
we were
wanna make
taking one at a time.
One at a
If
time,
it's
okay.
okay, yes, sir.
All right.
Well, what we could
I'm
do
good.
is
Well,
handle certain questions related to this and then go on to next ones and then circle back. I didn't want to, we don't have to take like firm action on this one without discussing the other ones.
got
but-
it, okay.
Okay.
Sounds like a
So
plan.
just on the matching funds, is the city allowed to do that? That's not considered a gift of public funds?
No, there, and it may be in the staff report, there's a, Kyle, where you talked about the return on investment
Okay.
being,
Okay, I just wanted to make
yeah.
sure that
And
was.
it's actually a pretty common, program
Yeah,
in a
well-
lot of cities for downtowns, yeah, the facade improvements. I know Carol and I have both worked on them in other cities as well.
Okay.
And again, for this, this is essentially the filler. We talked about a lot of different components and things that would have to happen. And the reason we bring that up is so that the committee and ultimately the council understands if this seems like a good idea, staff will dedicate more time into pursuing information for this. If it's not something that is of interest or that we think would be a benefit, then, we'll allocate our time to working on other things that may be better received.
Understood. And then on the review process, over here it talks about the pre-application fee waiver.
That's the,
Is that
one of
too-
the
am I
next
too far?
ones. Yeah, you might be.
Okay.
What's next?
Never mind now. I'll wait till that comes up. Thank you.
Additional questions on this section for the downtown facade? Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next area, Mr. Warsinski.
All right. So next one is a business attraction incentive program, and I've seen this from my colleagues, and you could call them competitors in other cities throughout the Southern California area, or even within our sub-region, which is to provide financial assistance to certain business types, or any business type in some scenarios, on attracting businesses to the city. And my personal feelings on this is I typically don't like giving out public money to private industry. A lot of times they ask me before they enter into the planning process, hey, what incentives does the city have? What money can you give me? And I tell them nothing. Because if you need $1 from the city to make your project work, to me, it's probably a bad project from the start. And that's just been my MO for my entire career here. We've entertained certain instances in which that changes. So I have a very specific list on what types of businesses I might contemplate offering just to discuss the option, because ultimately it's city council's decision on how public funds are spent. But oftentimes I don't even recommend it or propose it unless certain things that I feel are included are being discussed. And those are really economic benefits or public benefits that I felt confident in, that this is such a good project economically, job growth wise, sales tax wise, revenue wise, that maybe it is worth that type of discussion. And when I got to listening to some of the businesses that exist in the downtown, hearing about the offers that they're receiving from other jurisdictions around us, or that looking at other programs that other cities have, and if we want a development in the downtown to start, maybe an attraction program is something that we look at for certain business types to stimulate that. This might not be a program that goes forever, but maybe it is something that we use to kickstart interest, a marketing campaign for why you'd want to move your restaurant or your brewery to the downtown area. Well, Beaumont's offering a certain dollar amount to help pay for those initial costs, and that's something that it gets into that realm of public benefit or economic benefit that I think that we might be able to make a case to council that it isn't a gift of public funds, like Councilmember Laura said, it's for an economic reason. And that's the justification that we would create a program like this. So the scope would need to be defined. I've kicked around ideas in my head on a scope which would not be every business within the downtown we would be offering these dollars to, or would be applicable if they applied for them. It would be more targeted to certain industry groups. And I think that the intent of the program should be to get as much bang for the buck as possible. And how you do that in a downtown area, I think, are with businesses that are gonna bring people to the downtown area that other businesses are gonna wanna locate next to or nearby. And I think those might be restaurants with alcohol, bars, breweries, or other entertainment type uses would likely be good target industries to market towards these attraction dollars and say, if you were to open a restaurant in the city, we would give you X dollar amount. It could be done in multiple different fashions. It could just be a grant. You show up, you get $20,000. It could be something where you show up, you get $20,000, and if you last for 2 or 3 years, you're open for 2 or 3 years. Should say last, it's kind of mean, but it's the reality of a restaurant in any prior to COVID or post-COVID. But if you survive, you're still in operation for 3 years, your loan is forgiven, so you don't have to pay it back. If you take the $20,000, you open up and you move out in 6 months and you go to the city next door, you got to give us our money back. Those are the types of concepts that I've seen.
Eastvale has a very robust business attraction program, and they throw a lot of money at the types of businesses that
You
that
said
they want. Eastvale.
Theirs
Yeah.
is 50,000 per restaurant, not downtown related, like citywide, 50,000 as a forgivable loan. And they've had some good success in some of their businesses. So if you read the newspaper in the last couple of years and you see big name restaurant going to Eastvale, you can pretty much guarantee they're getting that 50 grand. And if they last the 2 or 3 years, like the program states, that grant or that loan is forgiven by the city. So that's the competition we're up against. I'm glad Christina mentioned it because I know she's heard me talk about that program and how it doesn't help us. But so that's another program. I don't know if we have any initial thoughts on this one or if we want to move to the next one.
I wanted to bring up a thought. Another way city, or I don't even think they're a city, but an area has approached this. I don't know if you've been to North Park in San Diego, but what they've done is they've created an incubation property that brings in small restaurants that actually they're focused on breweries and tap rooms and things like that. And they're given, when they come in, they're given incentives and help to come in and, bring their business in. They're not buying the land. But they're required to find a place to move within 3 years. So in other words, you help them build an audience and get their feet off the ground. And then in 3 years, you replace them with a new business. And they focus there on what they needed to revitalize their downtown. And when I was a kid growing up in San Diego, North Park was not a place you would go, period, regardless of who you were. And it's now completely turned around and revitalized itself, and it's a great place. The one that I'm talking about, they had a sort of a food service that would service people at breweries. and then they brought in 3 breweries. So it was primarily focused on breweries, and that has become a huge attraction in San Diego. San Diego has become one of the biggest attractions for that. But I'm not saying that we have to do that. If we're looking to bring in restaurants, or we're looking to bring in bistros or things like that, I think if the city owned the property and then helped businesses come in and start to develop there with the incentive that when you're ready to move, we'll help you move so we can bring another business in for incubation.
Yeah, the incubator ideas are great, like the Food Lab in Riverside, Haven City Market in Rancho Cucamonga. It's sort of like, I don't want to say fancy food court, but it's essentially dedicated to startup, small scale restaurants that with the goal ultimately they grow and have a following enough that they can move into a brick and mortar and be in the same general area, and another one can come in right behind them. So like the mayor said, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's anything that our residents would patron, it's an awesome concept. Yeah.
And another thought I had about your attracting businesses, if the city were to put out, I will refer to it as an RFP that says we would like a restaurant of a certain type to come into Beaumont, and this is the area we'd like you to come into, make us an offer. And then we could put together, and you might get multiple offers coming in. But also I think business attraction, I think the incentives are important, because often we know of a business that may be in one of our neighbors that is doing really well, but has issues as far as being able to grow. And I'd love to be able to go to some of these businesses. We could go to the Hat and say, hey, if you come to Beaumont, we'll do everything we can to help you come here. So
Yep.
I think having the incentive and being able to provide that with a direction of what we want to, how we want the downtown to look. I don't think we want to provide incentives for gas stations in the downtown.
Correct.
But,
Right.
bistros or
Yeah.
thing that's going to encourage the pedestrian type business, small shops, things like that. I think we should tailor an incentive program to what we want.
Right, and part of the discussion today would be that, and we could entertain it here or at the council level, but what would those businesses be? We know from the retail analysis that we have from Retail Coach and some of the other things that we have a gap in the restaurant area, right? We don't have a ton of, good quality eateries. It's a comment we get a lot. Why don't we have more restaurants? Go get some restaurants, bring them, well, this is our opportunity to do that. So if we want to target restaurants, if we want to target breweries, if we want to target small shops, specialty shops, or, anything like that, obviously we don't want to open it up wide to everything. It has to be in line with council's vision for the downtown. It has to provide a service that our residents would be happy to support so they can be successful.
Additional comments about incentives? Additional comments?
Yeah, I happen to agree with Councilman Wright. I think in your arsenal, in your toolbox of policies, procedures, financing, you need incentives, but again, incentives only work if you have a direction, a defined goal. You just can't shotgun it out there, because these businesses have to be targeted. You have to go after them. You have to be aggressive. Everybody else is doing it. So as a toolbox item in your toolbox, incentives are really great if you have a defined goal in mind, how you want to use those and how do you want to recruit particular types of businesses to your area.
Thank you, sir. Additional questions, comments regarding incentives? Questions, comments regarding incentives? Hearing none, then we'll move on to the next area.
Yeah, so next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to skip past the slide I had, and I'm going to go to this one, and then we'll go back to the last one. Just because we're we're just talking about the attraction program conceptually for restaurants and breweries and so forth, and that dovetails perfectly into this incentive program that we're talking about, because as when we're talking to some of the businesses, one of the barriers of entry that we've found for those specific industry types is our sewer fees. So as a city, it's very unique that the city owns and operates its own sewer enterprise and our sewer treatment plant. And in doing so, you establish sewer connection fees based on the use types. And it's, we don't need to go into how it's calculated, but either way, it's volume and what goes into the sewer line to make it easy, right? And as you can imagine, a restaurant or a brewery has more stuff that goes into the sewer line more often. Just inherently, that's how it works versus how you and I live at home and we run our washing machine and take a shower every day and so forth. So as you can imagine, their sewer fees are significantly higher. What we've seen in Beaumont within the downtown specifically is if we're looking at a restaurant that wants to move into a building, they have to install the kitchen in the building because not many of the existing buildings within this area have a kitchen or have seismic upgrades or have the ability to create a brewery. All of these tenant improvements cost a significant amount of money. So say they actually have that money. Then they have some money to operate the business until they start making money. Day one, they owe the city $10,000 to $25,000 in sewer fees to operate a restaurant, and that's paid before they can open day one. And that's been a barrier of entry. So they had enough money to put in the kitchen, but they don't have enough money to pay the sewer fee because. Or sometimes they have enough money to pay the sewer fee, but that was all their extra money that they were planning on operating the business before they started turning a profit. And we've heard this from multiple people that have looked at going into the downtown area. So one of the concepts that we had here, and it's not actually money that we would be paying out. It's just willing to waive or defer or sewer connection fees for certain business types that go into the downtown area. It would realistically only be applicable towards the higher end, higher users. So a small boutique shop or something like that isn't gonna need the sewer fee deferral because their sewer fee is gonna be a couple $100, maybe $1,000. But the restaurant or the brewery, they're going to be up in that $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 range that the types of restaurants that are coming to the downtown don't have the money for. In-N-Out's going to pay that fee all day, every day within a commercial shopping center in the city. They have that built in to their pro forma. They don't need that deferral or that waiver. But the small mom and pops that you often see within a downtown, they're the ones that could utilize and benefit from such a program. So that's the concept for this one, really to discuss whether we want to waive it in full, defer the payment. That had actually come up at one of the downtown business meetings, is, hey, we don't maybe need a waiver, but we're willing to pay it back in 2 or 3 years or something like that. Just help us by not charging it day one.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, so a lot of the buildings in downtown obviously are already connected to sewer, right? But what we found over the last few years in upgrading the sewer plant and going through all of the new regulations and policies that we as the city have to comply with is a lot of the businesses don't have required grease interceptors, right? And so even though we're refining that process right now so we can come up with a criteria that will fairly evaluate how each business, how to determine whether each type of business needs a grease interceptor or not, most restaurants that are cooking like like frijoles or tacos and beer, Cornerstone, they're gonna need a grease interceptor. Well, it's a pretty substantial amount of money to have to go back in and retrofit your building and install one of those to meet both environmental health requirements and our city sewer standards. So having some sort of connection or sewer fee deferral or forgiveness or, whatever it ends up being would be helpful in the downtown, not so much because we're talking about new businesses connecting, but because we're talking about retrofitting old businesses that need to be brought up to current standards so that we remain in compliance with our obligations in running a sewer plant, essentially.
Oh, wait.
I feel like I'm a little bit over my head here. Sewer fees are charged. And I remember Ray Santos mentioned to me several years ago when the veterinary office opened at Oak Valley and Beaumont Avenue that their sewer fees were very high because they had blood products that went into the sewers. Are these fees based because we have other fees that we're going to have to pay because of their activity? Is there a scale? How do we determine that, somebody owes $20,000 in sewer connection?
Sure, and you have two sets of fees. You have the initial fee when you make a connection, so when you build something new or when you change operation of an existing building to a different type of use, they could charge a fee and levy a fee on that. So it's based on the amount of use, so how much water is going down the sewer line, and then what's also in that stuff that goes down the sewer line.
So I actually reached out to the Public Works Department prior to this meeting because, again, in anticipation of questions that might be asked. So there are several factors that go into determining what the sewer fees will be. So here's an example for a restaurant. So a sit-down restaurant, $475 per occupant times the maximum occupant load. Bars and cocktail lounges, $928 per seat. An office, $289 per occupant times the maximum occupancy load, right? So there's a whole variety of factors depending on the type of use that is going to occur at that particular building. And then these are all, obviously there's a sewer rate study and, these fees have to be substantiated and adopted. So this is information we have currently. Sewer rate study is getting ready to be done again in a year or two. I'm not exactly sure on when that will kick off, but those rates will be studied again and then these amounts could change. But the fee is going to be dependent on the activity that's taking place, the size of the use, number of occupants, any of those types of things.
Additional questions or comments?
Yeah, but, okay, so we charge the fee. Okay, we charge $20,000 for the fee because we have this structure that says we're supposed to charge this fee. But there's no physical action on our behalf. And if we say this, I say things wrong. The $20,000 goes into our checking account at the city. They get $20,000. And then the business goes on and it pays their sewer bill every month. But this fee was just determined as a fee.
I get what the question is. So the fee goes to pay for the sewer treatment plant. So that's what it's for. It's not an arbitrary cost that we've come up with. It's methodology on what, because to
Maintenance,
have a
operation,
new
treatment.
business come in means the plant needs to already be there. We couldn't incrementally build the plant bigger and bigger and bigger each time a new house was built or each time a new business came online. So in theory, we've oversized the sewer treatment plant to accommodate for new businesses and new growth. So that $20,000 goes into the sewer fund, not the city fund, not the general fund. It goes into the sewer fund to help pay for the operations and the construction of that plant that was done previously.
So, and I think we're talking about a connection fee. So when we went to the community and said, we're going to raise your sewer rates because we have to spend $110 million to upgrade our plant, we wanted to make sure that they understood that they were not going to be paying for connections for everyone going forward. And so the whole idea was that as new people came in, as Kyle pointed out, the new connection fees would go to you say manage and maintenance, but also sort of to reimburse the rest of the community for putting up the money up front to get this started. So, but I do think that some cities have an electrical department, like the city of Banning, and they can use that to incentivize people to go there instead of here. Because to produce more electricity is not what it costs to charge it. What's that?
Water.
And water is too, and all we have is sewer. So, I don't think that all businesses are sewer heavy on fees.
No.
So it's gonna be just the kinds of businesses that we've talked about. I'm a little concerned here, and I'm jumping sort of ahead of myself because I think these ideas, maybe all of them except for maybe we haven't done the pre-application waiver, but these 4 items would be a great agenda for business development, the downtown business
Yes,
second meeting.
absolutely.
And when you get to talking about the sewer connection fee deferral program, we have a lot of existing businesses that are struggling because of our new upgraded sewer plant and the fact that we're contracted with a lot of people downstream, that we have new requirements. And the new requirements are taking some of these businesses and forcing them to upgrade their grease traps and their systems. And we've all talked to a number of businesses that have said, this will just crush me. And especially if you're a tenant of a property, you're going to put in the grease trap and then 5 years later your lease is up and you've spent that money up front to comply with our requirements, and then the property owner gets the benefit of having that grease trap for the next development. So I would like to see that we help out some of those businesses in a way that we can defer their sewer fees to match the cost of the grease trap over a certain period of time. I mean, and I'm not saying we give it to them, I'm just saying we defer it for them because it is, there's one real close by and they want, I think it was 30 or 40,000 to build a grease trap. And, and if you know anything about restaurants, and I grew up my dad was in the restaurant industry, your profit margin's about 2 or 3%. Unless you're a pizza place, then it's more like 20 or 30%. But for these businesses now to have to come up with 30 or 40 grand, it's I think we've all heard from some that are looking to leave. So I think if we start talking about sewer connection fee deferral for new businesses, which I think would be a good idea, I think we should also have some kind of plan in place to address the current upgrades we're requiring.
So I know we've,
I was going to say, quick question, just out of curiosity. Do we have some type of safeguard in place? Business A comes in, gets the incentive, the waiver. They have to start paying at 24 months. They close their doors at 23 and leave. Where do we eat that or?
no, we would have to put that as part of the scope of the program. And that would be something, if we proceed down this road, we'd vet with the legal, with city attorney's office, just to find out what the proper mechanism would be to make sure that the city is covered on our end, so that we don't end up in a situation where we hit that month 23 and then they bail and we're out, whatever they've essentially violated the terms of the program.
Okay.
And I know we've been at this a couple hours already, so in an effort to respect everyone's time, we just have the one item left, which should be pretty easy, but I want to recap. So what I've heard, Mayor, is yes, this is a good idea. We should vet this a little more, but also that we should probably set up another downtown meeting like we had before and maybe present these items or these incentives and get some
Makes
feedback.
sense.
Yeah.
Does that sound?
And when you say deferral and vet this, are you also looking at potentially making payments over a 24-month period as opposed to deferring it? Because with such a small profit margin, in 24 months, does it sound like they're going to have an extra $30,000 to put towards a sewer
Sure.
fee? But if you make payments over that 24 months, and you reduce that.
Absolutely. If it's something where we need to provide an option that would work
Okay.
better for the business, we can do that as well. Again, this is very preliminary, and like it says, we have to define the scope of the program. And this is the first step in even finding out, again, if it's amenable. Yes, we like what we hear, so we will continue to look and see what other cities have done, and then what some viable program options are, including vetting it through our legal counsel to make sure that if we set something up like this, we'll be able to then, have proper course of action if the process fails.
Not to drag the meeting out, but there was one more thought I had when you're talking about a facade improvement. A lot of these businesses have parking lots behind their businesses that have become dirt or big holes. And a lot of them would be more than happy to upgrade, their parking that they already have behind some of these businesses. So I think looking at that is very similar to what we're talking about with the facade program, where we will help, we will match, and those kinds of things.
Okay.
But I think these items, I think we got a pretty good turnout last time. We really worked on it to get that turnout. And they all expected us to continue. And I think these are, especially item number 1 and item number 4, I think would get people coming out and really interested in at least having the conversation.
We'll also have staff from Public Works and from the wastewater department available at this meeting to talk about the sewer connections and maybe in a more digestible for the everyday person to understand instead of these calculations, right? And then from the wastewater plant to have someone talk about the system that we have in development as far as how businesses will be identified as to whether or not they need a grease interceptor or not. And I think that would help tremendously people understand what the screening process will look like.
You had one more that you?
One more, and it's super simple. So the city of Beaumont has a pre-application, which is a application to pre-apply before you fill out the real application, which costs more. So the pre-application fee to pre-apply to go to the design review committee, which is, in my opinion, a pretty good deal considering it's only $907, gets comments from every single department on your proposed project before you spend a couple thousand on the real application. So you can end up saving yourself a lot of time and money on getting feedback early. But for some of the smallest businesses, the 907, although I think it's a good deal, is not a good deal, and I hear that a lot. The idea would be to waive that $907 fee only on projects within the downtown area, which is really where I get a lot of the pushback from prospective businesses, tenants. They're like, hey, I just want you to look at this thing. I'm like, well, that's pre-application. And they say like, okay, how much is it? Like $30? Like, no, $900. And they're like, hang up the phone. So they're obviously looking somewhere else. So this would be to waive that, and it's not waive it forever, it's just waive it for a certain amount of time in order to hopefully stimulate ideas and concepts within the downtown area. And this would be for target industries, it could be for all business types, every business that wants to look at a building within the downtown. And it's not included on this one, but also possibly offer a fee waiver on a pre-inspection from the building department to walk through an existing structure to figure out if it's seismically sound, if there's major issues, which could end up saving someone from purchasing a building they have a great idea for, but they don't have the $80,000 to upgrade the walls and the roof and the plumbing. So two and one on this one, but just a concept to go over. And obviously, as the mayor has asked and Christina has talked about, we'll present these to the downtown business group at a future meeting. Thank you.
You definitely need to drop the 92 cents.
Hey, we look at time, cost. Yeah, very precise. We don't round here.
That made career deal at 92 cents. So you got to get it out of there. No, it's a great. everything you presented, I think, lends itself to a very aggressive posture and program everybody's putting forth. I commend everybody who's put time and effort into this. This is more than I've seen in the last 10, 12 years I've been here in the city of Beaumont. I commend all of you.
Absolutely. I'd agree 100%. I'd also say, I'd hope it's not or, but the only one that I see that's not that expensive is the pre-app. The other three might be considered decisions of incoming businesses. One business may come in and say, hey, I don't mind paying the sewer fee, but man, I sure could use a nice facade on the front that would make my business look more attractive. Or the business that comes in and says, I've got a dirt parking lot and I've hit a few of those holes behind some of these businesses down here. We need a new blacktop and that's gonna cost $20,000. So I would hope that as we take it to the business community that we give them the option, since they're all in about that $20,000 to $50,000 range, you're talking about incentives or whatnot. So I think this is a fabulous presentation. That's my 2 cents. Fabulous.
So you have up on this, oh, it's not up on the screen. So the next steps, we can get it back up there, are make recommendations to the council or continue to the next EDC meeting or consider need for a workshop. What I think I've heard this evening is we got recommendations and directions on the first half. Mm-hmm. On the second half of the incentive programs, we're gonna set something up with the business community and present that to them. In the meantime, staff will continue to work to refine these programs a little bit more between now and the time that we meet with the community. And then we'll work with the city manager and council on getting the feedback from the business meeting and get something agendized for council for further discussion so we can work on refining the scope and dividing up the funds on how they'd like to be spent.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't know about anyone else. Like I say, I would hope instead of just taking that one program to the business, you take those three that, that cover that range and say, hey, this is what we're considering. How would you view this? How would you think other businesses would coming in? Yeah. And I could imagine some folks saying, I would take that one, or I'd take that one. If it's still the same pot of money, that's all 500,000. It means you're running three different initiatives or four versus just one.
The intent was to not have to pick one, but to have all four available based on recommendation from the committee and council's final decision. The real question is going to be that if we select all four, how do we allocate that 500,000 to split up among the programs? The pre-app stuff is obviously pretty easy. We could take a whole lot of those and not really put a dent in the money. But when we talk about facade improvements or sewer deferrals or offsetting the cost of grease interceptors and things like that, then the dollars, stack up a little bit more. So I think once we hear the business community and what their priorities would be, I think that will help us focus a little more on, where the money priorities then need to be and council can decide.
Absolutely, and I know, I know Dr. Brown does the same thing in their area. From the education side, we have line items, and then what we don't spend at the end of the year, we can move over into other areas to deplete that. So you might give a certain amount to each area, and then what the interest is, it wanes in one area, you can move that money over to where the real interest is.
I also think that if this leads in a direction where the businesses are excited about what we're trying to accomplish, and we start to get a little more business, I can't imagine council wouldn't consider increasing that, this campaign. So,
but you're going to get a return.
Yeah, I look at it as it's seed money. You got to invest money to move projects along, and this is kind of like seed money. And if things are starting to work, I'm sure the council will consider seriously, additional funds down the road. So
absolutely.
Then I'm hearing, Mr. Warsinski and Ms. Taylor, I'm hearing from our committee here a consensus that these items will be passed forward in the manner in which Ms. Taylor has offered. All right.
Yes,
then
sir.
there will no need for us to take a vote. We're in agreement that Beaumont's going to grow.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Warsinski and Ms. Taylor, for an outstanding presentation. At this time, we're going to move over to reports. Do we have any reports? All right, we move through those quickly. I know that Beaumont has probably already started school, right?
Tomorrow.
All right, tomorrow, you get to get your youngsters out of the house, and Mount San Jacinto starts on next Monday, so if you got kids down on the sofa gaming all day, sit them down and make them take a class. Mayor White?
So I had something that I don't see comments at the end, and it might be a report that I wanted to bring up. So the city is partnering with the Chamber of Commerce, as we do every year, on the state of the city.
Yes.
And we've decided to dedicate a table supported by the city for the members of both the Economic Development Committee and the Finance and Audit Committee. So I don't know if you've already been approached on that, but we want, oh, okay.
Well, that's on his ticket.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to let you know that I think we've already reached out or are going to reach out to see how many would like to take us up on this. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a special, a really good event, regardless of who the keynote speaker is, but.
All righty. Additional reports. You had something you want to say, Ms. Rader? Certainly about this. He's already carried, got it.
We have Good Morning Beaumont this Friday, but it is full.
Gotcha.
We are sold out. What we really need is a big event show.
I know a place.
Yeah.
All right, any additional reports? Hearing none, we will move on to topics for future agendas. We've had a full meeting here. Are there any agenda items that you'd like to see moved forward to the next agenda?
There is one. I don't know how much of it's an issue because I think what we're accomplishing here and what we're doing here in the Economic Development Committee is, I think it's exciting. Mm-hmm. And I think people who have been attending regularly are now feeling more relevant and as if they're accomplishing something. But I think we should consider why we do have a problem at some time. I mean, how many members are we missing tonight?
Tonight's 3.
We're missing 3 tonight. And in the other committees also, we're having a lack of interest. And I think that, again, I think the kind of stuff we're doing here will help to keep an interest in this committee. But I think we need to get sort of feedback from all the members as to how we could make this easier to attend. You know, I think in the finance and audit, my thought was maybe, you know, we don't have as many meetings. But I think what we're doing here, we really could use more meetings. But, so anyways, I just would, you know, maybe, I don't know how you would label that as a future agenda item, but we need to find out why people join the committee and why they don't feel an interest or encouraged to attend.
And I'd like to suggest what we did with the Finance and Audit Committee is the finance director and I met one-on-one with each committee member.
Okay.
To ask those questions. And that frees up the time when you're all together to talk about, you know, keep the momentum going. And so I think what we can do, Christina and I can sit down with each of the individual committee members as time permits, 30 minutes, and just kind of go through those questions. It was really relevant. It was really helpful with the Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay. So I don't need a future agenda.
All right. Additional discussions on topics? Additional discussion on topics? Hearing none, then we are at the point of adjournment. We don't need to take a vote. So the City of Beaumont Economic Development Committee is adjourned promptly at 6:14 p.m. Everyone drive safely and be careful.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
What?